right. Well, hi, everyone. Give this lighting a little bit better real quick. Okay. Well, hi, everyone. Welcome to my home for another in the series, What Can I Cook With?, where you tell me all the mystery ingredients that you have in your kitchen, and I show you what you can cook with them. All right. So today's request is for red cabbage. And I'm really excited about this one because I feel like a lot of times red cabbage is kind of relegated to over mayonnaised slaws and that one part of your salad that I always feel guilted into eating, but doesn't actually taste the best. But this beautiful vegetable is really high in fiber and vitamin C and vitamin A and potassium. And so it really deserves a more diverse role. Plus, it's this beautiful color that can really punch up whatever dish that you're cooking with. So today I will be making a ginger lemon pasta starring this lovely red cabbage and a bunch of other vegetables. At my house, we celebrate Meatless Mondays, and so I will be using some beans and some tofu as my protein source, but you could use whatever form of cooked meat that you have. The other veggies I have, you can see over here, I'm going to be adding some kale, some celery, a red bell pepper, and some butternut squash chunks that I defrosted from the freezer. You can see a lot of really beautiful colors, but you can use whatever vegetables you have on hand. If you've been watching me cook for the past couple weeks, you could probably tell I'm not a huge fan of following recipes. I think it's just a great way to get in the kitchen and experiment and use up whatever you have in your fridge. So that's what we will be doing today. And then for my pasta, I'm going to be using just this thin spaghetti, whole wheat spaghetti pasta. You could use whatever you have on hand, whatever shape, whatever texture. It's all good. So we'll go ahead and get started the way we normally do, which is going to be by heating our oil and cooking us some onion. All right, so I put some vegetable oil in here, about a teaspoon. You can kind of see it glinting. And over here in this pot, I have my hot water boiling for our pasta. So I'm not going to get that started quite yet, but I'm just going to make sure it's going to be ready for me when I'm ready for it. Got our oil heated up. I'm going to go ahead and add in 1 onion. So for this one, you could also use a red onion if you wanted to. This was about 1/2 of a large white onion. You could use whatever amount you have. And we're just going to let it cook. And at this point, I'm also going to add in my aromatics. So I've got some minced ginger right here. I just grated this on a grater. If you have ginger paste, you could use that as well. You could even use ginger powder in a pinch. It won't be as flavorful. And then I've got about 5 cloves of minced garlic here. And my family really likes garlic, so I added a little bit more than maybe I would if I was just cooking for guests. So if you're cooking this at home and you're not big garlic fans, you could just add a clove or 2. Go ahead and let that get cooking. The heat will help open up our garlic and our ginger as well as our onions. While that's getting started, I'm going to show you how to prepare some tofu. So you can see my setup right here. I can get it balanced. I've got a plate, my tofu, another plate, and a slightly heavy object. So I got a jar of tomatoes. This is so that we can squeeze out the excess liquid in our tofu. So you can see I had just had it wrapped in a clean dish towel. I started with extra firm tofu, but if you can't find extra firm, you could use medium firm or medium. I would stay away from soft. It won't really give you the texture we're looking for. So I've got my block of tofu. I had a lot of the liquid squeezed out. This will help it cook and keep it from falling apart. I'm going to start by cutting it in half. And just making sure I'm practicing good knife skills. I've got a good pinch grip on my knife for a lot of control. Making sure to cut things on flat edges. So I'm just going to go ahead. I want them to be a fairly small dice. This is just a matter of personal preference. If you wanted bigger pieces of tofu, you could leave it bigger. I'm just going to go ahead and cut it through this. I think it will get nice and brown on the outside if I have smaller pieces, and I'm going to fit with the overall texture of the dish a little bit better. Right. And again, if you have any questions throughout this, please feel free to type them into the chat box. And I'll try to answer them as I go along. Right. Sure, you can see the steam rising off of my onions and garlic and ginger over here. They're looking really good. They're smelling really good. I'm going to go ahead and add in my tofu right now because I want it to have some time before I add in the other vegetables to get kind of crispy. If you were cooking with a meat protein, you could add it in now and get it all cooked before you add in your veggies. All right. I'm just going to go ahead and give it a good stir. Make sure they get all coated with the oil so that they'll brown and get lots of flavoring on them from my spices. Hey, so I'll let that cook for a couple minutes. I can go ahead and move on to my pasta now. I've got my boiling water. You want it to be at a boiling boil. I'm going to add in my pasta. So pasta is one of the things that you want to cook it in plenty of water. This will help keep it from getting gummy. So use your biggest pot. And I'm just kind of eyeballing, maybe doing about 2 handfuls. Or using up my box. I'm going to let that go ahead and cook for a second. And I'll show you how to chop a cabbage. Great, so our pasta's going. Make sure actually to set a timer so I don't forget about it. This is angel hair, so I'm going to start with about 6 minutes so I can give it a taste then. I like my pasta al dente, which is to the tooth. So that little bit of bite in it. Don't want it to get overly mushy. Right, and our tofu is still going to need a couple more minutes. I'm going to go ahead and prepare my cabbage. Okay. So the best way, I think, for cabbage is to take off this little nub first. Getting a good grip on it and just slicing through. It'll be pretty hard. But then that gives us a nice stable surface for cutting on. And I'm going to actually cut off some of these little frills right here because I don't want any of my cabbage to go to waste. I just want to note that I already washed this in advance. I'm making sure all of our produce is clean. All right, and I'm just going to go right in half. And this is a pretty hefty one. You might have to work at it. There we go. Great. So I've got my 2 beautiful halves going on right here. So for this recipe, I mostly just want to have kind of pieces maybe about this big, maybe a little bit smaller. I want to make sure that when I'm eating it, I get bites that are going to have all of the veggies and flavor in it and not just a whole mouthful of cabbage or a whole mouthful of tofu. So similar to when we chopped an onion before, how we keep a root intact to kind of keep all the layers together, we're going to do the same thing with the cabbage, but I'm going to cut it right in half down the root, and it'll still be cut together. Right. So you can see it's all kind of held together. I'm just going to cut this way now. I might have to do a rough chop afterwards to kind of get it a little thinner. And I don't want too much of the core in it. It can be a little bit bitter. So I'm just going to cut around the outside now. Perfect. And I'm just going to use 1/2 of the cabbage. So let me just repeat that really quick with my other quarter. If you have a mandolin or a kitchen ingredient like that, that could help this go faster. All right. So I've got my beautiful amount of cabbage right here. This is all getting pretty well cooked. I can see my tofu is getting nicely browned. So I'm going to go ahead and add in my other vegetables after I give my pasta a stir. I'm going to start with my red bell pepper, my butternut squash, my celery. If you don't like your celery very crunchy in your dishes, you could have added it a little bit sooner, maybe when you added the tofu. And then I'm going to add in my kale. And I'm going to wait to add in my cabbage last, just because heat can sometimes decrease the amount of vitamin C. And I really want to maximize the vitamin C I'm getting from this. So I'm just going to add it in last, so it's not sitting in the heat as long. Just cook all these together. Now, if you can see, it's really beautiful. There's a lot of really bright colors. The visual aspect is super important when eating. You might notice when you feed things to yourselves or to your kids. And it's something that looks beautiful, you're more likely to enjoy it. Especially if you've never had it before. All right, so I'm just gonna let that cook for a couple minutes. We'll check on our pasta. I can tell just by stirring it, it's not quite ready. It still looks a little bit stiff on my spoon. So now this is kind of merged a little bit. I'm going to go ahead and add in some spices. I'm always going to add some black pepper, just a few good cranks. I see a great question in the chat is, can you use green cabbage? The answer is yes, absolutely. If you have green cabbage around, that was a perfect substitute. And then I'm going to go ahead and add in some chili powder. Getting lost in all of my things up here. So I'm just going to give it a good sprinkle. About a 1/4 teaspoon is what you're looking for. Then I'm going to add some crushed red pepper for a little bit extra spice. If you don't like spicy foods, you could totally omit this. If you're cooking at home and you're kind of looking through your spice cabinet and wanting to experiment with some, we recommend adding maybe like a lemon pepper or a paprika, even like a 5 spice powder would work really well. But yeah, this is a great recipe for experimentation, using what you've got. So even though cabbage is kind of the star and the inspiration for this dish, you could make it without it. Let me check my pasta. All right. I've seen a lot of things about throwing these on your cabinet doors to tell whether it's done. If that works for you, I say go for it. I like to just actually try it. and see if it's the texture I like. And this needs a little bit more time, maybe a minute or so. I'm going to go ahead and add in my cabbage now since this is almost finished cooking. This up. And just let that cook together for a couple minutes. Maybe more like a couple seconds. I think my sense of time on here is a little bit skewed. All right. And then I mentioned before, I will also be adding some beans. These are red beans, or you might see it called adzuki beans. They are what they use to make bean paste. If you've ever had red bean paste before, this is the type of beans that are used. They're really nice. You can see they're pretty mushy. So when I add them, they'll break down a lot and give it more of a creamy texture and really kind of hold everything together. You could substitute in other beans, whatever your favorite is, if you're looking to add it to this dish. But I'm going to wait to add those until I add my pasta, just so they don't break down too much. Okay. And try another piece. Yep. So that was about 8 minutes for this pasta. And I'm just going to go ahead and dump it out. See, I'm going to go ahead and transfer it using my strainer because there's a lot of good pasta water in there that has a lot of starches, which will help bring the dish together, kind of its own pasta sauce. So I don't want to dump it all down the drain. I just like to use one of these handheld strainers. Kind of get out as much as I can. All right. Okay. So now that this is looking pretty well cooked, this cabbage is getting a little bit softer. It's not in those kind of tightly packed leaves anymore. It's kind of individualized. My other vegetables are still really bright in color. You can see like the kale is really a bright green, which is really where we want it to be. We don't want to overcook it and have it start turning kind of a grayish brown. We want it to be at this color. And I'm going to go ahead and just add in my pasta on top of this and just try to incorporate it. Woo! Ah! Learn from my mistakes. Spaghetti slippery. Awesome. All right, and then I'm also going to add in my beans at this point. I have maybe about 2 cups, 1 3/4 cups that I'm adding. And again, the beans are totally optional. They just add a little bit more protein, kind of a creamier texture. And as I'm mixing, my heat is down on low. So I want it to just kind of start heating through. All right. Then I'm actually going to add in a little bit of the pasta water. Just again, to help it kind of incorporate, to help it all kind of stick together. Pasta sauce is really good for that if you're making a dish and a pasta dish and you need the sauce to be a little bit thinner or something like that, just using a little bit of your pasta water. All right. Then the last step is I'm going to sprinkle some lemon juice on top of this. Just got half a lemon right here. Pop out a seed so I don't squeeze it into the dish. Just sprinkle it around. If you don't have lemons or lemon juice, I think lime juice would work really well, or an apple cider vinegar. We just want a little bit of acid to kind of brighten up this dish a little bit. We'll just squeeze it on. right there. I like mine pretty lemony, so I'm probably going to end up using the other half of the lemon as well after I taste it. Again, the lemon, you could use something else, some other form of acid to help brighten up the dish as well. If you're using lime juice or apple cider vinegar, just make sure you taste it fairly often because those are pretty distinct flavors. So you want to make sure it works together well. All right. And there you have it, my friends. I don't know if you can really see how beautiful. Oh, I have a light on here. Should have turned that on earlier. I'm sorry about that. But I hope you can see how beautiful this is. Lots of really bright, beautiful colors. So if you make this at home, no matter what vegetables you use, try to use a whole rainbow full. Oh, I have a question. If I recommend cilantro. That is a great question. I think cilantro would go really well on here. If you're looking for additional herbs to kind of sprinkle on it. If you sprinkle like a basil or even a parsley, I think would go really well. Just a fresh herb on top. Yeah, great question. Awesome. Well, if there's no other questions and you finish watching this video, I ask that you please fill out the survey that's in the description box. It's for our federal reporting purposes, so it helps us make sure that we are teaching to people. So I appreciate you coming with me and cooking with me today. And I hope that if you make this on your own, you'll share it on our CCE Jefferson Facebook page. And if you have other suggestions for other ingredients that I should cook with or you want to know more about, please share it down either in the comments or on the comments for this whole video. And that